The Cleworth family gathered to reflect on those who had passed.
Regret to inform you that your son, Warrant Officer James Reginald Cleworth, is missing as a result of air operations on the 7th of March 1945. Stop.
And on Grandfather Bob's recurring question.
Catalina aircraft detailed for operational flight in the northern operational area.
It's dinner time, when you're ready. Okay.
Okay, mate, I'll be there in a minute. There you go. Yeah, and this is all you get. This is, as my father said, that's what you get for fighting for king and country, a bit of paper.
It began in the darkest days of World War II, when America sent a secret letter to Australia asking for help.
You really want to know?
Soon Aussie airmen were getting to grips with new American aircraft, and a new American commander, the legendary US General Douglas MacArthur, who had a very dangerous plan.
Well, we were flying along at one stage and my mate, Butch, he said, "Have you pooed?" And I said, "No." And one of the pilots came out and said, "Hey, have you pooed?" He says, "Yeah." "Where'd you put it?" "Oh," I said, "I lifted up the bloody hatch and let it drop down."
A cunning plan to send them out in very slow old flying boats to stop the mighty Japanese Navy.
Well, you can't do that. Once you lift the hatch up, the wind comes up, and all his poo was all scattered all through the plane.
So secret, they all got forgotten.
So poor old Lenny, when we got back to Cairns, we spent a couple of hours in the back scrub.
These are the men who flew Catalinas, and those who waited for their return, never knowing the secret.
Nice bloke, Len. Unfortunately, he got killed.
Why does one person live and not the other? It's a question that's haunted me for 70 years now.
For 70 years, Bob Cleworth has been trying to find his brother, lost at the bottom of the South China Sea in a flying boat in 1945.
Dad didn't want to talk about it because it used to upset my mum, really did upset her. She was hoping that he'd walk through the door any day, right to the end, yeah. He was the apple of the eye. Reg was the guy. I also knew that he was Mum's favourite.
So he grew up with a wall of silence, while Mum waited for Reg to come home, never talking about it.
When my mother actually did die, the night that she died, people at the hospital said to me, "Oh, did you have a brother in the war?" I said, "What about it?" She said, "Oh, nothing."
Are you coming, Robert?
Bob, a retired Sydney lawyer, now felt free to find out. With grandson Matt, he set off for Australia's National Archive.
See ya, righto, okay.
To search out wartime documents.
I really would like to know where they were and what happened. And I just know that somewhere there is something I'm looking for. It really wasn't until I started to trace my brother's steps that I realised just what sort of work they were doing.
But what began as a journey to end a family mystery was about to open up a lost military history.
Bob? Oh, hi. I'm David Frigga, Director General here at the National Archives. Welcome.
Bob's big hope was to get Reg's Royal Australian Air Force service record.
Well, today will be your lucky day because I think we have those secret documents that you're looking for.
Reg flew Catalinas, the slowest combat aircraft of World War II. It was slower than most aircraft of World War I. Yet in these, men were sent out to face far superior Japanese forces, like Zero fighters, flying 3 times as fast. Only a few cats survived. This one did, in a corner of Sydney's Bankstown Airport.
The Australian Catalinas were outstanding amongst all the other Catalinas that were operated anywhere else. They flew the longest distances, they did the most difficult jobs, they had the most terrible weather, mountainous terrain to get around, and never really been told.
Here we go. Right, good.
If this could be made to fly again, fantastic, that would be marvellous. I would just break up and cry, I think.
Philip Dulhunty and Neville Kennard found this Catalina and created the Cat Club. They had a dream: to make it fly again. It is a strange, magical craft, half boat, half plane, from a lost age.
I think I've always been fascinated by the Catalina. As I said earlier, it's a very charismatic aircraft. It's an ugly duckling. It's slow, it has an enormous range, it's got many, many drawbacks, but it's got character.
For Philip, the project is personal. He served in Australian Army intelligence.
I was in the infantry in New Guinea during the war and infantry intelligence, and we used the Catalinas a lot. Which I reckon I was one of the ones that was saved by the Catalinas. So it was very difficult to manoeuvre on the water, mainly because the 2 engines were very close together. These are the controls for the engines, the propeller. These are the rudder pedals to control the rudder. This is the window, so you can wave to all the girls.
So Bob joined the Cat Club and told his story.
And my mother got the telegram, and I can still remember the sort of cry of anguish that she got. His name was Reg. He was a navigator. His aircraft was, we don't know really, but presumed shot down somewhere up in the Pescadores up near Taiwan. Simple story is 3 aircraft went out and 2 came back, and they've never found the aircraft at all. Didn't come back.
You got the other bullet?
Bob had found companions.
This one from my brother, yeah. Any of them will do. Okay. But this one in particular, yeah.
Well, I think there are very few of the original people left today. They've all passed away, and of course they're all growing old.
These are Australia's few, the last surviving Catalina crews, meeting at Rathmines, their wartime base on Lake Macquarie, north of Sydney. It's Anzac Day, when Australian and New Zealand veterans gather to remember. Doug Nolan, Dick Oodie and Noel Tiger Lion flew Catalinas.
Most of the operations range from, say, 12 hours to 20 hours.
What speeds were you travelling at?
95 knots. Well, we'd start off at 95 knots, and by the time we were returning home after 22 hours, going like a bat out of hell, doing 105. Do we like it?
Yeah.
We worshipped it. Yes, it was a great aircraft.
No, it was. I hear any engines, there are a few old DC2, DC3s around. I rush out to see if it's a Catalina.
Yes. It's
very addictive.
Foul weather has never stopped a flight. He slides in, hull settling deep, following out for the takeoff. night, another mission, another prowl into the dark.
It was such a reliable aircraft. I had 1,500 hours in Catalinas. I only had one engine failure. Lovely aeroplane.
Yeah, well, there were 10 in the crew, and you had a really strong feeling of togetherness.
Yeah.
And it was a remarkably supportive group to be with. We could move up and down quite easily within the Catalina and feel at home.
One good feature of the aeroplane was a little electric stove in one compartment, and we carried a couple of meals each for us on the mission.
They did bombing and torpedo raids, landed agents behind enemy lines, saved sailors and airmen, and flew in medical supplies. Incredible to think they were still tossing bombs out of its open windows as America prepared to drop the atom bomb on Japan.
Bob's coming over here.
Good morning.
How are you? That's good. Nice to see you.
Too. So we've got some interesting records for you to view this morning. Firstly, there's this one.
Fantastic.
And a few of these are secret records from RAAF Command relating to the Catalina flying boat operations. And we've got some other operational records in there. They're fairly extensive. Now, we weren't able to locate a service record relating to your brother, unfortunately, but this is the service record of Payne, Cyril Henry.
Bob's best hope, Reggie's Air Force service record, was missing.
So hopefully there'll be some useful material in that one as well.
His impossible mission only got harder.
Alright, well, let's get started.
Yeah, righto.
What was so important to send Reg and the crew so far from home in such a slow old flying boat right at the end of the war? Cyril Payne is one of Australia's last surviving Catalina aircrew. He flew in the same squadron as Reg.
Oh no, I got 1,000 hours flying. I'm doing it tough these days. I don't know, that age we didn't get sick. It was just part of the business. I don't know, I don't know that at any stage was I scared. Very good blokes, the Catalina crews. You have to have confidence in your pilot, you know. And the bloke I had, Bill Minty, he was not recognised as, you know, the number one P in the pot. But I'd have gone anywhere with Bill. That book is my logbook, flying logbook. Well, it's the history of my flying in the Royal Australian Air Force. If you've lost it, that's bad luck.
Why does Australia not know about its Catalina and its crew?
I think all these operations during the war were top secret. There was a lot of effort made to keep it absolute top secret.
But Philip had a greater claim.
We say that the Catalina did for Australia what the Spitfire did for England. Catalina was the plane that saved Australia from the Japanese. We're trying to break the secret and tell everybody just what these Catalina boys did.
Who was the first person to tell you where you'd be flying on a mission the next day?
Oh, one of the waitresses. We were living in the hotel. We used to come down for breakfast and then the waitress would come and say, "She's all right today, no flying today." So we'd go straight into the bar and stay there the rest of the day. It was a pretty terrible life. It was common knowledge, you know, around Cairns, like all this bullshit about, you know, secrecy and that. Everybody knew, God. They all knew.
A secret everyone knew? An old flying boat that won a war? Are these the fantasies of old men?
What is this super plane?
Even during the war, US Navy filmmakers mocked their own aeroplane.
Anything familiar? That torso with a middle-aged sag? Her speed less than some cars can do. Maneuverable? Some days all right. She dives under protest. An aerial antique, acting like a dive bomber, wagging her tail, feeling her years, but as fit for combat as good wishes can make her.
For Bob, it got more confusing.
Thousands of pages of documents.
And there was something else he was searching for.
And I suppose I would like to find in all these dry official pages just one shred of humanity about what happened.
Says that Warrant Officer Clueworth, Royal Australian Air Force, held in honour as one who served King and country in World War II and gave his life to save mankind from tyranny. And that is what you get if you die for your king and country.
Okay, now, got the other round yet? Whoops. Not to worry, old chap, not to worry.
I even now, when I hear that they've found an aircraft somewhere, I always think, oh wow, that could be it.
That's 4 out of 6 fastening points put together. We just have to now reach up and get the arms behind me, which is the folding mechanism. This is why I brought a large hammer today.
When the first production models appeared in 1936, it could have been supposed that only a few hundred would ever be produced. But world events took a sudden turn.
The Catalina was obsolete before the war and about to be scrapped. Then Japan struck Hawaii and the Philippines in December 1941.
It was a time when plane making was still the domain of the craftsman. This is the main wing assembly area, where two technologies, sophisticated steel framework and old world hand stitching, brought canvas and metal together to form the massive PBY wing.
Saved from the scrap heap, the Catalina suddenly became the Allies' miracle plane in the Pacific.
These craftsmen are in a sense as much boat builders as plane makers.
The Japanese bombed all the airports and all the airfields in New Guinea and in Northern Australia, Darwin and Broome. So we had to have flying boats. And we actually ended up with about a couple of hundred Catalinas.
Yet the totally unexpected achievements of Australia's Catalina crews were never explained or officially recognised.
So it was a major contribution, and General MacArthur recognised that, and he interviewed our Catalina crews at the end of the war. He said there were 3 things that allowed him to win the war. The Jeep, and the Dakota, and the Catalina.
Yes.
You saw MacArthur say that?
No, I didn't, but it's,
he was quoted saying that.
It's reported by one of our crews, and we trust them.
Oh, okay. This is the one. This is it. This is a letter from MacArthur to Curtin, giving high praise to the Catalina squadrons, rendering magnificent service. MacArthur says here, it is my intention to use the fighting strength of air units in Australia and of the United States to the limit of capacity. Yours sincerely, Douglas MacArthur. Oh, wow, there we go. Look at that. General Douglas MacArthur was the Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces. He was appointed that way, and he had a close connection with John Curtin, who was the Australian Prime Minister.
Reg was flying with the US Navy now, but something was missing. MacArthur had a far greater role for Australia's cat crews. What were these new limits that would take Reg so far away? Reg and Cyril broke the rules, taking cameras on operations. Suddenly, men from Australian cities and the bush were thrown into exotic worlds of the South Pacific. the Spice Islands, and making friends with natives in dugout canoes to save lives.
Did Cyril talk about the war much?
No, not for some time. He wasn't really interested in going in the big march on Anzac Day or anything like that. I think he had a few hang-ups from the Air Force to start with, like drinking, smoking. Oh no, I think he was like most men.
Oh, I think some men were more so. I mean, we used to do it a bit, but I don't think we ever went overboard like some of them did. Is that right or not? No, not right.
Oh.
Not right. If we weren't flying, we're drinking.
What about women?
No women that mucked up with drinking. No.
Oh dear.
General MacArthur planned something far more dangerous for Australia's Catalina cruise. The Archive's Elizabeth Masters discovered his secret wartime map.
This is the RAAF mine laying campaign charter targets. This is from the original, and it shows where all the mines were laid there.
A vast scheme to lay mines in every strategic port across the southwest Pacific, to stop the Japanese Navy and its merchant supply ships from ever putting to sea.
This is a really very important map, and it shows exactly where they all were and why the Catalinas were so important.
The RAAF carried out the missions under US command. Reg was laying mines, in secret, at night.
He was up at this place called Wallio, which is...
Bob now had the rough location for Reg's final fatal night. Work on the Cat was going well, but the Cat Club faced a new threat.
It's fairly simple. You can get as emotional as you like about the aircraft and its history and whatever, but unless we get a bundle of cash in a short period of time to get this old aeroplane back in the air, it will become forgotten.
Businessman Col Evans volunteered to raise restoration funds. He had a harsh condition.
I honestly think that by November it flies or it burns. We need to get on with the job or decide it's a dead horse and people simply aren't interested, and we'll let it die.
Even the Japanese didn't manage to do that. If Bob was to find Reg, he had to crack the American and Japanese wartime codes.
This one, which I was rather hoping would help me on the one called Ducky, which was another one, doesn't help me at all. It just doesn't give any clue as to what Ducky is. Ducky. This is the problem. Everything's so secret.
Documents were no longer enough. He had to find someone to talk to. Someone who could have met Reg.
I don't think I'm going to find it here. We're going to Illawarra Regional Airport, and I'm going to meet a man down there who flew in my brother Reg's squadron in World War II, and I'm hoping to find out a little bit more about what happened.
How about that?
I'll just go up here. Come here. I'll just go up. One of those things you never get over with. You sort of learn to live with it more than anything else, because you know, when something happens, even like that Spitfire they found the other day in the middle of the Arabian desert, you think, oh well, there's still chances, you know, to... Well, I think more of my mum, you know, like what happened to her when it all happened. She was really knocked about.
Hello, Robert.
G'day, mate.
What do you know?
Oh, not much, mate. If I knew a bit more, I wouldn't be here.
There's two of us.
Yeah. Initially, they thought it was a bit of a pain in the ass. Yeah.
Bob's son Doug came.
Well, he's the sort of fella that you can't help but go along with it.
And Cyril's wife Bernice and their son Leslie. Cyril stepped back into the past. He and Reg flew in 20 Squadron. He'd did some of the first mine laying under US command. He was Bob's next big hope.
I'm going to jump up there though, won't we?
Ah, now you're still a young fellow. We brought a set of stairs for you.
There, mate, so I can't get up there.
Just one at a time.
One at a time, mate. Nobody rush.
How about that?
Take another. Just grab the handbar underneath here. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now step over.
That's it.
And the next one, roll forward.
Right, roll forward and stand up.
Up you go.
My word.
Yeah, Cyril, you were in 20 Squadron, and so my brother was in 20 Squadron. Did you ever run across him?
Everybody lived in hotels, and no two crews lived in the same hotel, and half the time you wouldn't even know they were. We never came to a certain central point to get briefed, you know. We just, somebody say, oh, you're flying at 1 o'clock. So off you go down at 1 o'clock and did your thing and came back, and that's about all that ever happened. And you wouldn't know who the next crew was.
Another hope was dashed. Men in the same squadrons might never meet, even flying the same operation. But could it explain the secrecy? Everyone knew their own little bit, including the waitress, never seeing the vast mining plan they were part of.
3 cats went out, 2 other aircraft found the target and went in, I think, and they did load their mines, and the last they saw of my brother's aircraft was a blip on the radar screen.
The official reason was bad weather. That wasn't the whole story.
Sometime after the war I was contacted by a guy called John Gibson who was on the same mission, and he said, are you Bob Cluth? I said, yeah. He said, I just want to let you know that A24203 went down due to bad weather. He said, that's a lot of bullshit.
You want me to tell you now exactly what happened?
Yeah.
Bob made this home video with him in the late 1990s. John Gibson was the last surviving witness to see what happened that night.
Well, I was in the crew of A2465 over the Pescadore Islands. It was a dark sort of a night. I don't think the weather was any worse than most of the targets we'd been on over there. And we were going in towards Datum, and it was noted, searchlights came up and just missed our tail, and then picked up an aircraft that was following us, and I assumed that it was Ross Schultz's aircraft, because I don't know of any other aircraft in the area there at the time, and it was most certainly a Catalina. Right. And all of a sudden it got hit. There was a terrific explosion, just a very big flash. The skipper saw the flash and he was facing the other way, so it covered the sky pretty well. I was manning the starboard blister, the .5. John Mackenzie was in the port blister, and he saw what I saw. You couldn't miss it if you were looking aft, and we were looking aft. I called my skipper up and said, well, I think one of our fellas had been clobbered. Right. And my skipper's name was Lynn Fletcher.
But John Gibson's account was omitted from official records. How could both versions be right?
I rang his skipper, which was Fletcher, and another guy who was in the plane with him, the wireless operator, and they said, yeah, Gibbo told us. He rang up on the comm and said, looks like we've lost one, Skip. He said, but at the time he didn't know it was A24203, because for the same reason as Cyril had said they didn't know at the time he was flying with them.
A chance wartime photograph captured John Gibson and Reggie's skipper, Ross Schultz, together in a cat crew boat. One would live to see the other die.
Why does one person live and not the other? They used to take their photos just about every mission they went out because it was the last photo.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen. The last raid I did, we did a drop bomb somewhere, and on the way back, the bloke that came behind us he let off a flare, and he was lit up like Luna Park. And the Japs got stuck in him, and 2 of his guys got killed. Oh yeah.
My encounter with the Japanese guns was at Macassar on our second night of mine laying. We were shot at from the ground also. Our armourer gunner copped a Jap bullet in the right buttock because he's partly turned away from the scenery.
Oh, we had some very difficult storms, and in fact some of our planes we know did not return because of the weather.
I was in the other blister on the guns that night, and actually the tracer coming up at us was a bit like fireworks. Very beautiful, but very frightening.
We buried the 2 guys on the island, and our skipper did the burying business.
Bit by bit, Reg's squadron moved north, the Spice Islands, Java, crossing the equator, onto the Philippines. The further they went, the greater the risk, flying deeper and deeper into Japanese territory. Reg was the navigator.
This is the navigator's table where Reg would have sat. He would have had his charts laid out here, and he would have had his dividers and compass points. There would have been an instrument panel up here which would have given him the airspeed and the necessary information he needed to do his calculations on course.
Survival was down to the skills of the pilot and navigator to get there and back, all the way up to China now.
And they used to plot the course out, and then they'd check it just like you do today on the long trips. I know this from Doug Nolan, that they would have checked up on star sites and stuff like that.
As navigator, we use a lot of astro navigation with a sextant on the stars and the planets and the sun and moon in daylight, of course.
They had to navigate a region of weather still treacherous to aircraft today. And yet another danger was added.
The Australians, to get the range and to carry the bombs, took all the wheels off and all the armour plating out of them to get so that they could do the distance and carry the mines.
Catalinas were too heavy to carry the mines the longer distances. When they got to the target, the really hard job began, dropping their mines in ports at precise, predetermined locations, flying low and under fire.
You must realise we did these operations at 200 feet, so it's only about 2 wingspans high. To find our datum, we had to fly right over this ship, and we got a few hits.
Crews were pushed beyond the limits, even intended for the flying boat.
He would have been pretty full-time job doing the nabbing, and then they'd do the mine laying run when they were coming in at about 200 feet. He'd be laying on his stomach up there, the gun would be out of the way, and he'd be looking out that front window to watch for the datum point coming up.
And they had to fly across a very steady course to drop the mine in the exact position. I think the Allies realised that they were going to move into this area themselves sometimes, so they had to retrieve these mines that hadn't gone off.
In December 1944, General MacArthur's American forces moved to retake the Philippines.
I said to the people of the Philippines whence I came, I shall return. Tonight, I repeat those words. I shall return.
All 4 RAAF Catalina squadrons were sent in advance to mine Manila Harbour.
They sent 25 cats up there to mine Manila Harbour. They bottled up the Japanese fleet.
The Catalina's biggest operation was crucial to pave the way for MacArthur's return to Manila and keep his promise to the people of the Philippines. Noel Lyon was on that raid.
No mine was more than a yard outside its plotted position.
By sheer skill, Australian cat crews got more out of the Catalina than anyone ever thought possible. One cat did not return. The crew of the Dabster was never found.
Did you feel you were lucky to survive the war, all of you?
Oh yes, definitely. We were glad to, certainly. Yes, we were lucky to survive the war. Yeah.
I suppose everybody was lucky that it's still around.
I was on the radar that night. The entrance to Manila Harbour was only 1/3 the size of the actual target. We turned around very smartly, got out of there. We had started off into the Japanese naval base.
To find our datum, which I was directing the pilot over it, we had to fly right over this ship. Of course, he opened fire, and we got a few hits. We went out to do our mine laying run. It was a timed run. When I turned my little pinpoint light on it, there was no time on the clock. So I said to the pilot, "Sorry, Bluey, but I must have either forgot to press the button or I pressed it twice." So we went round again, flew over the same ship. He opened fire and he hit us again, but he didn't shoot us down. And we made the run this time successfully.
Were you afraid?
No, it's a funny thing. I crossed my legs, that's all. It's a funny thing. We always felt that we would get through. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just...
There were 322 aircrew who didn't come back. And that was a fairly significant figure in terms of
fair
those of us.
yeah.
My brother was one of them.
Yeah.
There he is there. I mean, I can remember the last time he was home. Not that I knew it was the last time he was home. He was waiting for his girlfriend, Kath, and I was as proud as anything you could get, have a brother in the Air Force. And I always remember this. I said to him, what are you going to do when the war's over, Reg? Are you going to stay in the Air Force? He said, I don't know whether I'll be back. That's what he said.
Did Reg know the peril ahead on that last visit home? But for those left behind, there is a worse fate. Missing.
My name's Rhonda Stewart, but my father, Marshal Bowness, he was killed he never returned from the war. He's still missing. He was 27.
Noel, did you know Marshall?
No,
he didn't know actually.
For relatives of the missing, the search goes on for a lifetime.
My father was a navigator.
Was he?
too, yes.
What name was he?
Bowness, B-O-W-N-E-S-S, Marshall.
The uncertainty had a profound effect. Bob witnessed the devastating mental toll on his mother.
She had a nervous breakdown. She had to go out to Caulfield Hospital. They put her through shock treatment to try and get her sorted out. But she was always waiting for Reg to come in the door, and she kept his letters.
The last written 7 days before he died.
Took a little while to get used to the idea that my brother wasn't going to come back again. I know I got into a couple of fights with people, some of my schoolmates. I smacked one guy in the face or something. But it was probably more reaction than anything else.
Australia's Catalina crews have no official recognition.
The War Memorial in Canberra hasn't caught up with the fact of what Catalinas did. A disgrace, really. Because it's the one thing in Australian aerial history made all the difference in the world.
Even in the War Museum in Canberra, when we were there a few years ago, the only reference to a Catalina was a small photograph somewhere.
It is history. It is Australian history. It is something to be remembered. And I've been to quite a few aircraft museums in the United States and other places. They have preserved their history, their aviation history, very well. I don't think we've done it as well here. And it's lack of interest, lack of passion.
But why did such a vital campaign and a great story stay hidden once the need for secrecy passed?
Well, after the war, we hardly ever got a mention. And I thought, Jesus, and our guys were flying day and night. We were doing a mine laying place, and I talked to Yat, and he said, No bloody way would we go and do this. Oh, God. And us silly buggers were going out.
Bob now suspected something more. Things never written down in Australian or American records.
These 4 squadrons that these were in were actually doing what was known at the time as the Americans' dirty work for them. Not in the context that a lot of people would think, but mining is known as dirty work. I interviewed one of the American guys who was Lieutenant Ivor Collins, who was one of the mine warfare officers who set up the mine depots in Cairns. Ivor said the RAAF got more out of the Catalina aircraft than the Americans ever did. And I can always remember he said, Bob, the RAAF did the real mining in the Southwest Pacific.
And there were tensions.
That was the time when the troopers had a big blue. The Yankees leaned out the bloody window and said, "You'll be sorry. You see what we've done to your women." Well, that was on for young. They chased bloody Yanks for about 20 miles. Boy, that was on for young and old, that was.
What became of General MacArthur's wartime praise? Dick Udy campaigned for recognition.
The Japanese at the end of the war admitted that 1/3 of their maritime fleet was constrained because of the deep sea mining that we did.
They got more recognition from the Japanese after the war than the Americans.
The Japanese had no doubt about the effectiveness of Catalina mining. Cyril had grim proof.
Not a lot of love because a few of our blokes had their heads cut off. Some of our cats were forced down when they were captured by the Japs.
2 Catalina men that I do know who were beheaded by the Japanese, and one was Hemsworth and the other fellow's name was Banville. They were top secret up until the Japanese realised it was the Catalinas.
Capture was avoided by any means. Escape maps were printed on silk scarves. A button became a compass. But another post-war American map aroused Bob's suspicions.
This map here, which shows the mining operations which took place in the Southwest Pacific, it doesn't mention the RAAF at all. The RAAF records were absorbed into the American history of the South Pacific operations, and therefore they were lost. The Americans absorbed our history, or our efforts into their history. But if you want to find out from the files of the RAAF did on that particular mission that aircraft was lost, it doesn't put anything in for A24203 because it didn't complete its mission.
Somewhere there had to be American paperwork with Reg's last flight. With no more documentary evidence, Bob reached a dead end.
Did you find that letter from Douglas MacArthur?
Yeah, with a great lot of difficulty and stress. Yes, I did. I find it, yeah.
You're obviously going to be home fairly late. Do you want food when you get home?
Oh, look, leave it up to us when we get there and we'll sort something out. No worries. Okay, mate. I'll see you later.
Okie dokie.
Righto, matey.
How important is family support?
Being as an old family lawyer, I know that quite a number of academics have had divorces just because of the fact that one of the members has been spending more time in the university when they should be spending time at home. I've been lucky. When I met Gwen, I won the lottery.
There it might all have ended, until staff found a forgotten wartime file.
We have located this, which may be of interest. This is what we call his casualty file. So it contains information about the accident. You'll see just on the first page here, there's a note, and I think that relates to your father.
Yeah, that's my father. I haven't seen that before, really. That's fantastic.
Reg's casualty file had information he'd waited over 70 years for. There were shocks in store. Reg flew an extra mission just 2 days before his last flight. It was never recorded in his logbook.
There's no doubt in that, in his face, you could see that he realised the dangers that were involved in flying these missions. They were extremely exhausted and he was tired. You could tell that by his eyes. So these guys were really, pushed to the limit, in some cases beyond the limit.
The crew left for their most distant operation. They took off exhausted. There it was.
Wow, what do you know? This is it.
Bob and Matt found the American records of Reg's last flight. There was another shock.
Here we are. This is it. This is where they took off. And the take-off time to get the cat in the air was 100 seconds. They flew at an altitude above sea level of 10 feet. That's probably not much higher than this ceiling.
But that night was different. They were ordered to fly at an insane 10 feet above the waves. And no one was ever told. The world advanced. The cats stayed the same, getting ever more vulnerable and always getting more asked of them.
They were almost, weren't they, in some cases, almost like a suicide mission. They would have been sitting ducks, if anybody had spotted them.
The American report held more surprises and contradictions.
The third plane failed to return to base. The searchlight was observed as planes were leaving the target, but it failed to locate aircraft. No known opposition. I know another guy who was on that mission. No known opposition. He said that's bullshit. There was opposition.
For 2 days, American aircraft searched for the lost airmen.
It's a summary of the mission and the searches that had been made.
Nothing was found. Only his equipment came back.
Well, I can remember the man bringing it. At the time there was a big box. I even got him to sign an indemnity form. Fascinating part here is the equipment that came back with his kit. Cloth warrant officer's badge, razor blades, 2 pieces of a wristwatch, pair of pyjamas, handkerchief, towel, tweezers, a shaving brush and a razor. That's pretty sad, that. I've never seen that.
And there was more.
This is a casualty file, but it's a record of a call from my father to the RAAF. It says, Mr. J.R. Cluett called this morning, Squadron Leader Kersham confirmed that the information he had received from his friend was correct. Mrs. Cluett, his wife, is recovering from the effects of an operation, and Mr. Cluett requested that if any drastic news is received, not to telegraph it out, but to get in touch with the Reverend Mansley Bennett, the Methodist minister in 31 Nine Bay Road. My mother virtually almost had a nervous breakdown, I can recall that. If there is bad news, he will break the news. No means of determining the fate of the crew. There you go, and that was on the 4th of July 1945.
1 month later, an American B-29 dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, and the war ended.
That's my father's writing.
2 years passed before Reg Cluett was declared dead.
There you go.
The key to the family secret and the military secret lay together in the same file for over 70 years.
That's definitely something I have never seen.
You okay?
Yeah. That's a bit of closure, a little bit.
But the sense of closure didn't last long. The Cluett family received stunning news. While filming, Bob and Gwen's daughter Lynette, a brilliant educationalist in Western Australia, fell ill. Events of 70 years ago were put aside.
Hello, Bernice. How are you?
Well, good morning, Bob.
How are you going? Lynette was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer
of the gallbladder, which basically means that unless she responds to treatment, she will be out of this world probably in 12 months' time. She was told to get on with life, and she's now devoting a little bit more time to her family than to her profession. The thing is, you've got to deal with it, let's put it that way, it's better terminology, haven't you?
Absolutely.
It was after the war that Cyril and Bernice had to find their greatest courage when they lost 2 of their own sons.
Gary was the youngest and died at 15. We found out he had leukaemia on the 21st of May 1970.
Later, their son Jeff died from diabetes.
I guess we thought, why us? How come God would put this on us?
And our blokes, ours are all speck and span, and they died. Why? Why not them? No, you think the other buggers are going on their merry way? And how come they survive and our blokes don't survive? When he died, I said to one of the nurses, "Where is he? Can I see him?" She said, "No." No. She says, "You won't want to see him." Oh, I'm still crying.
Everybody has had some sorrow in their life. All of us are heroes. I mean, you can't sit down and be miserable and lie down and die because of it.
That's right.
You just keep going. There's no answer. There's no answer.
I think once you can understand the loss of a young person in the prime of their life, like Reg, 22 years of age, when I say come to terms, yeah, to a point, yeah, you can understand that. But with Lynette, it was a little bit different. Age 51, in the prime of her life. Definitely a tragedy, definitely far too young. But I thank my brother, if you like, for helping to prepare me for that situation.
Gwen, would you like to add anything or not?
No.
He died actually in the lounge room.
Just near the toilet.
We rang the doctor and the doctor said, "Where is he?" And we said, "He's in the wheelchair." And he said, "Oh, for God's sake, get him out of that and put him on the bed." They don't like it when they go rigor mortis sets in the sitting position. And David and I were laughing and we're going, you're making it difficult to the end.
Well, my father told me, this is true, make sure I'm dead, would you stick a pin in me and make sure I am? He said, because I've been buried alive before, which he was on the Western Front. He told me that. There you go.
There it is.
Right at the top's got the label on it.
James Raymond Cluworth.
That's Grandpa.
That's what you look like.
That's right.
The men dream on.
How's that? Well, yeah, I'm 90 years old and I can't keep this up forever. I'll snuff it.